All right. Um, One of the things that we're constantly talking and thinking about is obviously ourselves. I mean, I don't know if you noticed just a little bit earlier, but I was trying to shift my computer around so I could get just the right light on myself so I could get like weird glares and shadows away because it seems that we're always constantly worried about the way we look, the way we the way that we might be perceived because whether we like it or not, we want to be approved. We want others' approval. We want to look good and we want ourselves to feel good. So we shift things and we change things about ourselves, or maybe we capitalize things about ourselves so that that part of us will be rejected even more. And so that's who we'll be represented by is the best things of ourselves or the things that people want to see about us. And that's the reason why I also chose this very passage in Exodus, where we're gonna spend a lot of time in. We're gonna look at Moses, and we're gonna look at the Exodus, and we're gonna look at Aaron. So tonight we're gonna see the mouthpiece, the image that is represented through man. So if we go back to this verse, if you look at verse 17, there's a verse in here, verse 16. There's actually a part of this verse that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. And that is verse 16 says this: God says to Moses, and he himself, that is Aaron, will be as a mouthpiece for you, that is Moses, and you shall be to him as God. That makes me uncomfortable because God is going to be represented through one man. And the reason that makes me uncomfortable is because, well, for two reasons. The first reason is that one man is going to have the authority and the approval of God. And he can use that. And he knows that he has that. And he knows that people are looking to him to make that decisions that God would have him make. One man is driving the boat, whichever direction it turns. But God has called one man with his authority, his approval, to lead these people. And that can easily be abused, or it could be used for great things. The second reason that makes me uncomfortable is because all of who God is could not be contained in one man. Moses, as one man, could not represent all of who God is or all that God is. God's glory cannot be inside of just one man. God's glory would consume man. So everything that God could be represented by through one man just makes this verse really edgy to me. Moses, you will be like a god to Aaron. He will see you as a god, and he will be your mouthpiece. So to clear all of that up, let's just back up a little bit. Because you know the story of Exodus. You've probably watched the movie, The Prince of Egypt. I love that movie. Not everything in that movie, though, is actually correct according to the word. There's a lot of variation in there. So let's actually back up and in this story when God is speaking to Moses. In the book of Exodus, chapter 4, this is just after God calls Moses. The book of Exodus, chapter 4. And we're going to go back to verse 10. Then Moses said to the Lord, O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither before nor since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. So the Lord said to him, Who has made man's mouth? Or who makes the mute, the deaf, the seeing, or the blind? Have not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth, and teach you what you will say. But he said, O my Lord, please send your hand of whomever else you may send. Moses is scared. Says, God, I am not the speaker. I'm not the one for this job. I'm not the one that you should be represented through. God, this scares me, what you are asking me to do. And God's response to that is verse 14. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. And he said, is not Aaron the Levite your brother? I know that he can speak well. And look, he has come to see you. And when he sees you, he'll be glad in his heart. Now you will speak to him and put the words in his mouth. And I will be in your mouth and in his mouth, and I will teach you what you shall do. So he shall be your spokesman to the people, and he himself shall be as a mouth for you, and you shall be to him as God. Either way, God called Moses for this very task. He said, you will be the one I'm represented through, and Aaron will speak. Look at the way that God covers all of the bases right here. Moses, Aaron will be your mouthpiece. You will speak to him, and he will say what you need him to say. But it's not just you speaking, Moses. Actually, what's happening is I am the one speaking. I have the words. I am with you in all this. I have the words, and I'll put them in your mouth, Moses. And then then I will also be with Aaron's mouth. It's me that's speaking. So God is speaking to Moses what Aaron will say. Moses, you're just the guy that I'm using. You represent me, but I will be in your mouth, and I will be in Aaron's mouth. You will be the image, and Aaron will be the mouthpiece, but behind all of this, it's actually me. And everyone will see me and who I am, Moses. The image of God is a responsibility for Moses, and he has to go to the land that he came out of to represent who God is to God's own people. And not only to God's people, but also to the nation that's enslaved them, also to Pharaoh, who has plunged them into evil, the one that has polygamy, polytheism everywhere. There's not just one, there's everything of everything. And Pharaoh controls it and sees himself as a god. And Moses' task is to take Aaron and say, no, this is who God is. And he's calling people out of everything that he is not to be his people. From the beginning of the calling, Moses didn't quite understand all of that, though. Moses just heard, you're going to represent me and you're going to speak. And Moses is like, whoa, this is too big. I talk weird, by the way. But what God had in mind was not evil. It was not embarrassing. It wasn't shameful. It was the best thing that they needed. It was the greatest thing that they needed. Moses just couldn't see that far yet, though. He was just too nearsighted and too worried about himself, how he might look, and how he might sound. When God already had the solution for all of that, and it was already laid out. This idea of God taking his word and putting it in a person's mouth is not uncommon. This might be the most elaborate explanation that we see of this, just working through a man and a man to accomplish something. But this is exactly how the prophets worked in all of time. God took his word and put it in the mouth of the prophets, who wrote it down and spoke it and preached it. And one of them tried to run away from it, but got redirected so that he actually would have to speak it to another whole people. And the mission that God had for all these people was really similar to the one that he gave Moses and Aaron to speak. I'm sending you to a people to say, this is not who God is. And I'm calling you out of this to be with me and to represent who I am and to represent all that I am in truth and righteousness, in love, in hope, in obedience. So he had it written down and he had it orated and spoken. And all these people were sent out to call their own nation Israel, Judah, or even the ones around them, Edom. Anybody that would listen to say, this is who God is. Come out of evil and be with God. And all of these prophets also rightly had to display who God is in their word, in their presentation. But God had already put it on their hearts and on their minds and had them record what he would say. It wasn't them. It was God working to call others out. So man representing who God is has been going on all this time. The word of God has been delivered in and through man for thousands of years, for generations, for people. It was just scary to see it happen through Moses, for Moses to see it happen through him. But it keeps going, and it keeps happening. And this is how God is represented. And this is how people know who God is, through his mouthpiece and through the people that represent him. And it's often, you see it as often as two types of things, the mouthpiece and then the image. Separate, Moses, Aaron, who God is, the prophets, the word, see who God is, until finally the new covenant comes around and we see them all come back into one. Jesus Christ. As you're familiar with in the book of John, John chapter 1, verse 1. You know this verse. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. The Word was God. He is the beginning, and in the beginning with God, and all things were made through him, and without him nothing was made. In him was life. The life was the light of men, and the light shines into the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. Hold on to that thought right there. Let's jump down a little bit. Verse 14. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we beheld his glory, and the glory was the only begotten Father, full of grace and truth. You see, Jesus himself is the Word this time. The Word is actually coming down. The Word is actually represented through the Word itself. Jesus is that Word and the speaker and the one that says, come to me, come out of evil, come out of the multiplicity of things that pull you away from me and are not me. Come and be with me. Come and be mine. And then not only does he say that, but so much more. And he says, here are the lessons that I have to give you. Here's the truth. And I'll speak it into you and you will hear it. Because this is what John says in verse 15. John 1:15. John bore witness of him and cried out, saying, this was he of whom I said, he who comes after me is preferred before me, for he was before me. Jesus is the Word. God and the Word are finally revealed as one. And another one says, that's who Jesus is. This is the one. This is what we need. This is what we've been waiting for. Just as Israel was waiting for the Savior, waiting for the relief of Egypt, John says, this is what we need right now. And Jesus says, come to me and I will lead you out of evil into what is truth and what is right and what is the Word. So where does that leave us today now that Jesus has already ascended? Now that he's gone up? What do we wait for? Well, we still have everything. We still have that Word. And we also have the responsibility of the image. Galatians 2:20. You probably know this verse also. I've been crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Christ lives in me. When we take on the name Christian, we are the representation of who God is, whether we use that to represent him well or to represent him, to misrepresent him. We have that option as our will. Whatever we do, when we say that we are Christian, when we belong to God, people will look at us, the way we act, the way we talk, the way we are, what we do and say, that must be who God is, whether that is a good representation or an evil representation when you take on that name. But he hasn't just left us with the image, luckily. We don't have all of the display of who God is. His glory is not just beaming out of us. That is for him. But what we do have is still his words in us. We have his word in copy. We still have the mouthpiece. And we are also that mouthpiece when we testify about who God is. Say, this is why I am who I am. This is why I behave who I behave. This is why I represent God the way I represent him, is because I want to represent him well, not with abuse, not with a power struggle, not with a way of evil, or to make myself appear to be the one, the great one, but actually the opposite. I'm humble so that God's humility can be represented through me. You will see God's love through me. You will see God's patience through me. You will see his mercy, his forgiveness, his gentleness, his kindness, his long-suffering. You will see that through me because I know that I represent who God is. And I will speak the words of God because these are the words that he has put in my mouth and in my heart. These are the truths that he will have spoken. We are the image of God. We were created in his image. And as Christians, we display who God is. And we have the truth of who God is. And we should speak that truth. The Lord dwells within all of us. Will he be seen through you? Will he be heard through you? Just like when God was sending Moses out. Moses was kind of blind to the full picture, to the full image of what was happening, of God's purpose. But God just needed him to go and to trust him and to speak the things that he had given to him. God just needs you to speak the things, the truth that he's given you, and to go and to represent him well. He's never had any evil planned. He's only ever had good planned. He's only ever wanted to call people out of evil to good. And you have the words, and you have God who's going with us to do that. Christ lives within us, and he's calling us to represent him well as we take on the name Christian. I want to keep this really short because I want that to stick with you as we go throughout the rest of this week, whether you see anybody outside of your house or not. Wherever you go, whoever you are, whoever you talk with, you represent who God is. So I hope this sticks with you as we're in a time that wants to oppress God, just as Moses was going into a place that oppressed the real God, that he still had to represent rightly who God is, and we do also. I thank you for your attention.